Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we'll be discussing why it's so important that Christians stand up and speak up for those Jewish communities living in Judea and Samaria, known as the biblical Heartland of Israel. Warm welcome to the programme, and today's special guest is all the way from South Wales. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Phil Lewis, representing the Christian Friends of Israel communities. Phil, always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
And Phil, the last time that you were on the Middle East Report was with Martin Cohen, and that was a nice programme because we looked back at the last decade of the Middle East Report. So I'm great that you are here to really talk about the communities that live in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel. But can you remind myself and our viewers of your testimony, how you came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ?
Well, it began many, many years ago. After a tragedy when I was 2.5, I had to go back from Perry Bar, where I lived then, to Penawern, to a 2 up, 2 down, live with my grandparents. And whilst I was in primary school, my grandfather, a miner, gave me a book to read. It wasn't the famous Five or anything like that. It was The Five Chimneys. And that just told the story of Auschwitz. I read it, and from that moment on, it never left. And then my grandmother, who was in her 60s, took me to chapel every Sunday morning, went to Sunday school in the afternoon, and from that time on, until I was about 17, 18, I just went. And one evening it was, I think YWAM were in the church I was at then, Park Chapel, and I just felt at that time I had to commit myself to the Lord. Things changed from then on. I always sort of spoke a good game, not always lived it, but there we go. But that was sort of a brief history of my gradual conversion then.
Amazing. So it all come out of the Welsh Revival of 1904?
It did.
Amazing. And also, can you just share with us when the Lord placed a love in your heart for Israel and the Jewish people? Because I know that the Jewish people are very dear to your heart and you have such a passion for them.
Yeah, the passion came, I think, from initially reading Martin Gilbert's book. And I remember reading that the Jews in the 30s started to prepare themselves for the worst, but not for the unthinkable. And that touched me, as many things, little sort of instances like that, a sentence you might read. And from then on, I started to wonder why this obsession, this world's obsession with the Jewish people, why they were the center of attention, why the focus was always on them, because the land itself is the same size as Wales. We are known as Little Israel. And I think I've mentioned this before. When I spoke to somebody in Israel, they said to me, I wish we could be known as Little Wales. So from that time on, it grew, and it grew, and it grew into perhaps an obsession. But somebody said it's a magnificent obsession.
Excellent. And your obsession has taken you a long way, because I think I remember meeting you and your wife, Bren, who's lovely, for the first time in about 2010, when you took part in a pro-Israel counter-rally to the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, who were protesting at the presence of the Ahava store, which was they sold Dead Sea beauty products in Covent Garden. And you and Bren would drive all the way up from your home in South Wales near Cardiff, all the way to London to show your love and support. And I think that touched those Jewish people that were there, that only had to travel from North London. But the fact that you were there, not only did you have the Israeli flag with you, but you also waved the Welsh flag as well. And that's how we came to know each other. And that's how, I was impressed at your love for Israel and the Jewish people. And that was a practical, visible love. And just attending that demonstration every Saturday while the store was open was just incredible.
Yeah, it went on for about 2 years. Myself, my wife, and a few others, Pam and Shirley. And others came and others went. But it was a pivotal time. Met some great people, Jonathan Hoffman, Reuben Katz, who sadly passed away a few weeks ago. I think you've met Reuben. And really out of that came quite a horrible parallel. I was looking at the events of 2011 and 2012, and they took me back to Berlin in 1935 and 1936. And the horrible parallel was that in Berlin in 1936, it was the Nazi flag was first flown. There were the blood libels, and there was the closure of the first Jewish shop in Berlin. Now we come then to Covent Garden and London, 2011. And the Jewish flag was desecrated. There was a type of blood libel where they would scream Ahava Mud, Palestinian blood. And then the Ahava shop closed in 2011. And the irony was that both cities were preparing for the Olympic Games. The 1936 Berlin, the 2012 London Games. But it didn't end there, because in 2012, the British Olympic Committee put them behind the screen, the Israeli judo team, for them not to be seen. And similarly, in 1936, the Jews were hidden. So it was an awful time. Although the games were deemed a success, in a lot of people's eyes, they were not, because they mirrored 36 Berlin.
And Phil, also our friendship is going on the fact that you were instrumental in inviting me to speak at kind of Nancy's farm. And Nancy was a very special woman indeed. And I love going to her venues, which she just opened up a farm, a big, how do you describe it? Just a big, huge lounge with a big fire, in which she was able to bring like people from the surrounding areas, about 70, 80 people to come and hear pro-Israel speakers. Just share with us how important Nancy was, but also what Nancy did for the Jewish people in her memory, because sadly she passed away earlier this year.
Well, Nancy loved you and Katie. All she spoke about was you and Katie having one of the lodges. Please get Simon down, please get Katie down, all the time. Well, you did come and you were welcomed and you felt the warmth there. Nancy was a mother to so many people. A lot of people entered her home broken, shattered, destroyed, tormented. But when they left, they were being put back together again. And as I say, they came in perhaps as nobodies, but they left as somebodies. And so many people she helped, and so many people she took under her wing. And believe it or not, this lady was in her 80s. We felt safe. And that was the big thing. We felt safe with Nancy. And we all loved her. I know her family had to share her with us, but that's the way sometimes it goes. But we love Nancy, and I'm not the only one.
No.
And I feel such a privilege speaking about her, you know.
Just share with us as well, she had a passion and love for Israel, and that came across. And I love the way she's a little bit like a matron, organising everyone to sit down and everything else. It would take charge of her meetings.
Yes.
But all she had was a farm, and she just gave that up to the Lord, and he would just bring these amazing individuals to come and speak from all over the world. But she had a real special love for Holocaust survivors. And I know that she had many Holocaust survivors come and visit her and share their sad but very compelling and powerful testimonies of how they survived Nazism.
Yeah, so many came, and one in particular came over, and his story is remarkable. He was a Holocaust survivor. He got to Israel via Cyprus in 1948. he fought in the War of Independence, and he fought in every war then up until 1973. He spoke 12 languages and only went to school for 2 years. And people say, surely not. Well, when I used to go to Israel and I'd meet up with Zvi Kalisher, and tour guides would want him to come along to speak in German to that audience, or Russian, or Hungarian, or whatever. And as I say, he just picked up languages in about a fortnight. And I can bear testimony to that it is true, because he spoke Farsi, because his wife came from Iran, and he spoke Hungarian, believe it or not, because when he was billeted, two sharing the billet with him were Hungarian. The funny one was he spoke Swedish, because where he was living at this time, neighbours either side were Swedish. So he would just listen to them. And one day they said to him, how many years did you spend in Sweden? He said, I've never been. He said, you're lying. He said, I've never been, because you're speaking the language as a native. He said, I've been listening to you for the last fortnight. So that was funny, he could just pick it up. So this person, Zvi Kalisher, sadly died a few years ago. I think you've met him. We've been to his home, he's been to ours. And that was just one example, because she said to me, please, when you go to Israel, I want Zvi. I don't want anybody else, I just want Zvi. She knew who she wanted. She had an agenda, and as you've said, she was one step ahead of everybody else. And as a consequence, we always got the right people, and we were introduced to some remarkable individuals.
Absolutely. So special thanks to the dedication and love of Nancy, and particularly Nancy's farm. So very much, and this is to her family, that Nancy is very special to me, very special to Phil, and to the Christian Zionist community in South Wales for all that she did for Israel and the Jewish people, and she won't be forgotten. So yeah, very, very special family, woman in Nancy. And Phil, this is also a sad day, because this is the first recording of the Middle East Report since the death of our beloved monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. What are your thoughts on our Christian Queen and the shame that she never got the opportunity to visit Israel, the Holy Land?
Yes. Same with the Queen, obviously. For some reason, we all felt safe while she was our Queen. And that was such a comfort in the difficult times. I know the Foreign Office stopped her from travelling to Israel for the wildest of reasons. They adopted a foreign policy of pick and mix. I don't know if you remember Woolworths. Pick and mix and match. And they adopted a policy whereby they would use the Balfour Declaration, which was a binding, irrevocable part of international law, and then they would put in something from the 1937 Peel Commission, which spoke about the Palestinian rights to the land, which was not in the Balfour Declaration at all. The Foreign Office spoke about a vital caveat that the Israelis hadn't fulfilled. They'd fulfilled everything, that they would grant religious and civil rights to the indigenous, the people who lived there, but it never mentioned political rights, which the 1937 Peel Commission did. So this is really wrong, because the Peel Commission of 1937 didn't get off the paper. It wasn't a binding article of international law, but for some reason they decided to put that into the Balfour and then accuse the Israelis of violating something which they never did. They fulfilled it to the nth degree, because within Israel, Arabs are politicians, the members of the Knesset. They're lorry drivers, bus drivers, doctors, lawyers, whatever. They can go anywhere they like. They're free, the freest people in the Middle East. So they've got to get their act together. Somebody's got to challenge the Foreign Office and saying your reason, your policy is driven by information which is incorrect. And it's frustrating, but somebody's got to challenge them.
Absolutely. So let's share now with what some of Israel's political leaders have said about the death of Queen Elizabeth II, our monarch. This is what Isaac Herzog said. He's the president of Israel. He said, HM Queen Elizabeth II was known far and wide simply as the Queen. Her passing is the end of an era. Together with the Israeli people, I grieve her loss and extend my deepest sympathies to the British people and all nations of the Commonwealth who have lost their monarch. Queen Elizabeth was a historic figure. She lived history, she made history, and with her passing, she leaves a magnificent, inspirational legacy. As the 11th President of Israel, I express my condolences to the royal family, to the King and the Queen Consort, to the people of the United Kingdom, and to all nations of the Commonwealth. I'll just give you the response from the Israeli Prime Minister, Yair Lapid. It says, on behalf of the government of Israel and the people of Israel, I send my condolences to the royal family and the people of the United Kingdom on the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She leaves behind an unparalleled legacy of leadership and service. May her memory be a blessing. Now, considering that Israel and Britain haven't always had the best of relations, and let's put that mildly, not because of Israel's fault, but because of the British attitude towards Israel, particularly during her birth as a nation reborn in fulfilment of biblical prophecy at the end of the Second World War on the 14th of May 1948. And then, of course, we see that relations got warmer in the 50s up into 52. But it's extraordinary to think that Margaret Thatcher was the first British Prime Minister ever to visit Israel, and that was in 1986. So it's only in kind of recent times have we seen that closeness of relations develop between Israel and Britain. But what does the statement made by Isaac Herzog, the President of Israel, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, show about their warmth for the Queen, but also the love that they hold Britain as well?
Yeah, the Israelis are a very forgiving people. They think the best of as best they can. But we have let the Israelis down. I think we're still in violation of international law by having our embassy in Tel Aviv. It should be in Jerusalem, according to the mandate. No land, according to the mandate, was to be ceded, but it's going to be. Well, the world thinks it's going to be. But I feel a little bit more positive regarding the future, because both PM Truss and Rishi Sunak, they mooted that they are thinking about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Wow. And regarding King Charles III, there is some good blood there, because I believe that George V was Queen Elizabeth's grandfather, and he was very positive towards Israel. And secondly, King Charles's father, his grandmother, or Prince Charles's grandmother, Princess Alice, although she was born deaf, she could lip read by the time she was 9 years of age, and then she could also sign in several languages. And she is buried on the Mount of Olives because she protected a Jewish family during the Second World War, was interrogated by the Gestapo, but she then played on her deafness, and they thought to themselves, well, she doesn't know much, we'll just leave her alone. And she's considered righteous amongst the Gentiles. So even though perhaps people say this and say that and don't fulfill it, I feel quite confident with the new Prime Minister and our new King that something could happen. I feel quite warm about it. And I'm hoping that grandparents, great-grandparents, whatever, will come through.
So let's have a look at this excellent news report produced by CBN's Chris Mitchell that is entitled Israeli Leaders Pay a Tribute to Queen Elizabeth's Inspirational Legacy.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl. Israeli leaders paid tribute to Queen Elizabeth II after Great Britain's longest reigning monarch died at the age of 96. Tel Aviv lit up its city hall with the British flag. Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid sent condolences on behalf of the Israeli people and said on Twitter she leaves behind an unparalleled legacy. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said in a statement that Queen Elizabeth was a historic figure. She lived history, she made history, and with her passing, she leaves a magnificent, inspirational legacy. And Defense Minister Benny Gantz tweeted that under her reign, UK-Israel relations flourished. Even though Queen Elizabeth visited dozens of countries, including some in the Middle East, she never visited Israel. But her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, and her sons, Prince Edward and then Prince Charles, did. And her grandson, Prince William, made history in 2018 when he became the first British royal to make an official visit to the Jewish state. The royal family has a special connection with the Jewish people. Princess Alice, the mother-in-law of Queen Elizabeth, is recognized as a righteous Gentile for saving a family during the Holocaust. She's buried on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. CBN's Brody Carter brings us this look at the life of the Queen.
Royal gun salutes, flowers, moments of silence, and heartfelt tributes are among the commemorations in Britain and worldwide, mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth II.
Because the Queen was respected around the world.
United Kingdom's Prime Minister Liz Truss hailed the Queen as the rock of modern Britain.
Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her.
A double rainbow appeared in the sky over Buckingham Palace shortly before the announcement of the Queen's death, news that stunned the public.
Shocked. I can't believe it. I'm gutted. Absolutely gutted.
Quite shocking, really. You kind of always knew it was coming, but when it happens, it's just sad.
Born April 21st, 1926 in London's Mayfair district, Queen Elizabeth was born to King George VI and became the Princess of Wales during the Second World War. And when her father died of cancer, the 25-year-old princess became queen in 1952.
Prime Minister Winston Churchill is among the dignitaries who watch as the Archbishop of Canterbury confirms Elizabeth's sovereignty by placing on her head the 6-pound King Edward's crown.
Known for her pageantry as a royal queen, her exemplary leadership, and her public statements of faith in Jesus Christ, Queen Elizabeth even developed a friendship founded in faith with the famous American evangelist Billy Graham.
For me, the teachings of Christ and my own personal accountability before God provide a framework in which I try to lead my life. I, like so many of you, have drawn great comfort in difficult times from Christ's words and example.
The monarch in Britain is in some ways the head of the Church of England, and she took that role very, very seriously.
Nicoletta Golace, historian of British history at the University of New Hampshire, says the Queen honored that position and remembered those who served her country in wartime.
She never missed a Remembrance Sunday when people remembered the veterans of the 2 world wars. In fact, this year she tried very hard to make it, but her mobility and health issues got in the way. But the other times, she only missed it when she was pregnant. She attended church services regularly, and as you said, she gave a warming and inspiring address to the nation every single Christmas.
And her handling of foreign relations, along with the pageantry of the crown, made her a beloved figure around the world. London Bridge is down. Those are the code words for the Queen's death, spoken Thursday by her private secretary to inform the Prime Minister and the Council, setting into motion the events leading up to the coronation of her son, King Charles III.
I think that this is going to shake Britons to the core, but it's also going to have an impact on people throughout the Commonwealth, some of whom looked upon her as a crown head, even though they were living in independent countries.
Great Britain recently celebrated the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, a commemoration of 70 years on the throne. Elizabeth ruled longer than any other monarch in British history. The Queen died at Balmoral Castle, her summer estate in the Scottish Highlands. That's where she's been since the month of July. Her death came shortly after an announcement from Parliament about her failing health, leading to a new monarch on the throne who will have a formal coronation, although he already took the throne upon his mother's death.
He is king because the minute the spirit left the Queen's body, he became the king. It is a mystical thing that happens.
Britain now begins 10 days of mourning. The Queen's body will be sent by train to King's Cross Station. Charles will be there with Prime Minister Truss. Now, the Queen will lie in state at Westminster Hall, and the funeral will take place at Westminster Abbey. Brody Carter, CBN News.
And such a shame that our Queen didn't have the opportunity to visit Israel, to see the Holy Land, to see Jerusalem. But we thank the Lord that her son and her grandson have. I just want to read out one last statement, and this is, obviously we know very well, Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of the opposition. He said, my wife Sarah and I, along with all the people of Israel, send our condolences to the people of Britain and to the royal family on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. She was a legendary sovereign, a beacon of integrity, and a steward of the second Elizabethan age, which will be remembered down the centuries. Her memories will be blessed. So, I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? The compassion, the love shown by Israel, by Israel's leaders towards the Queen. And the one thing is quite extraordinary when you go to Israel is how many Israelis love Britain. They love British culture. They love our history. And many of them come here because they want to see our nation and spend time in our nation.
Yes, it's lovely to go there, and it's lovely to be British, perhaps even more special to be Welsh. But no, it's they love us, we love them. It's a shame really that certain things haven't been ironed out. As you mentioned, the deceased Queen Elizabeth II loved the Lord. She loved Zion. I'm sure she had a special place in her heart for Israel and her people. And for her to be sort of head of our nation is a privilege. And as I say, her son has been, her grandson has been, her husband went. And it's such a shame that the Foreign Office did what they did. But hopefully Charles will go as king. And with the Israeli people, when you go there, they just take you in. Whether you go down to the Kotel, the Wailing Wall, if there's a bar mitzvah on, they welcome you in. I remember once I followed some music and I got into a wedding party and they allowed me to join and I danced with the rabbis. They are so fit, I was shattered. But they're so warm. They just want you to be part and parcel of who they are.
Phil, you're here today to represent the Christian Friends of Israel communities. Can you share with us who the Christian Friends of the Israel communities are and why this organisation is so special to you?
Yeah, well, it's headed by Sandra Oster Barras, an Israeli. She lives in Karnei Shomron, in what is called a settlement, but it's a community, and headed by a lady called Kimberly, co-headed in the United States. So if you ever visit the communities in Judea and Samaria, as you go up into the mountains, you feel God's pleasure. The land responds to them. You go into what's a desert, because Israel is so dry, and yet it's a net exporter of water. It is so dry, and yet it feeds not only its own people, but the world. And as I said, the land just responds to them. It's as if it's responding to its rightful owners. And when you were there, you just want to go back and back. You just don't want to leave. And I love going to the communities. They have to be guarded, of course. Terrible things have happened there. Really bad stuff. But somehow they value life. And going there, I miss it so much. I miss the heartlands. Really, they're not the heartlands as such. They should be called the rib cage, because they are protecting Jerusalem, the heart of Israel. And even though they've been through a lot and they've been attacked night and day and night, they're standing firm and protecting Jerusalem, that heart. and it's a rib cage that needs to be strengthened. And I think it's a mandate from God to the church that we provoke them to jealousy. Unfortunately, we've been provoking them, more than provoking them to jealousy, but we need to take on this mandate from God to the church to stand with them. Not to stand with them and to be there for them, and not let them be that sort of lonely child in the playground.
So let's take a look now at connecting with the biblical land of Israel.
After centuries of exile and dispersion, the people of Israel have returned to the biblical heartland, our ancestral homeland, just as God promised.
Even if your outcasts are at the ends of the world, from there the Lord your God will gather you. He will bring you to the land that your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it.
We have settled this land in fulfillment of prophecy, but we are also building a good and kind society where we reach out to our neighbors, care for them, and comfort them.
My wife and I were both Holocaust survivors, and we were married for 69 years. She passed away 3 years ago. I live alone.
Losing a spouse is an earth-shattering experience for our seniors. Loneliness, depression, this is where we must step in. At the Seniors Club, they connect to people. They smile, they laugh, they come alive.
A family in financial crisis is a family that cannot function. We help them find jobs and work with them to become better parents. But first, we have to make sure they have food.
Okay, guys, we have to pack 600 food packages for tonight, so the family will have food for the holidays.
And that's where CFOIC Heartland has made all the difference.
We face so many levels of need. Teenagers at risk, children growing up in dysfunctional families, children with learning disabilities and ADD, and handicapped children. Early intervention is critical, but we're far from the urban centers where resources are plentiful. In Judea and Samaria, the community and the professionals work together, providing children with the care and the love they need. We enable these youngsters to become productive adults, contributing to Israel.
I love it here.
CFOIC has played a vital role in turning a dream of redemption into a reality.
We are surrounded by hostile Arabs who attack us at every opportunity. The Israeli army has our backs, but they can't be everywhere at once. Volunteer rapid responders are filling in the gap, protecting the people of Judea and Samaria.
What we need is cameras, drones, and communication devices.
I have been attacked by terrorists. I've lost friends. Terrorists murdered 2 boys who were hiking in the valley below. But thanks to surveillance cameras donated by CFOIC, we will be able to stop the terror before it attacks us. Our Christian friends are literally saving lives.
The restoration of our people and our land has brought ongoing challenges and risks. God has blessed our efforts, and so have you, our Christian friends. We are struggling to settle biblical Israel, to put down roots in our ancestral homeland. But you can partner with us as we nurture our children, embrace our elderly, and protect our families. Join us today and experience the fulfillment of prophecy. Support CFOIC Heartland and take part in building Judea and Samaria.
And just to say that if you've been to Israel but have never been to Judea and Samaria, can't recommend it enough to you. You have to go. And I went only in 2019, and there was, what astonished me is that I thought, why haven't I been here before? It's absolutely incredible. I mean, this is the site, especially when you go to Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant rested. You know, this is the story where you see that David defeated Goliath. This is where Joshua crossed over the Jordan. And this is the biblical heritage of Israel. And yet the world describes it as the West Bank or the Palestinian occupied territories. But this area is known as Judea and Samaria. And of course, what is Judea? It's the land of the Jews. Just share with us your experience, Phil, of being in Judea and Samaria, and what you experienced when you were there.
Yeah, whilst you were there, you just feel as if you're going home, and it's difficult to put into words, but when you were there, you can see that the land which was formerly desert, there was just nothing there. There was nobody living there. They couldn't support anybody. But all of a sudden, it's come alive. And it's come alive because, as I said earlier, the rightful owners are back. The occupied Palestinian territories are neither occupied nor Palestinian. And I'm not saying that. The Palestinians are saying that. Because in the 1964 Charter, Article 24, they stated that they exercise no sovereignty over what they called the West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria. And they said we occupy no territorial sovereignty over the West Bank in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. So is it Jordanian? Well, no, because when the Jordanians annexed the land illegally, I think it was in 1950, it was not recognized by the international community other than by Pakistan, I believe Iraq, and also Britain. But so it was not recognized, and today they don't recognize it as part of theirs. So it is strange, really, that we who had the mandate to ensure that the whole of Israel, the whole of Judea and Samaria, the whole of Gaza and the Golan Heights remained and became an independent, sovereign Jewish state. They didn't establish a Jewish state. You must remember that the UN did not, it didn't spring out of the UN. This happened in 1920. And it wasn't established in 1920, it was re-established. It wasn't constituted, it was reconstituted. It was reborn.
Absolutely. But how important is it that Christians recognise that Judea and Samaria is the biblical heartland of Israel and kind of look beyond the coverage of our mainstream media or our news outlets or what our politicians are saying or what the international diplomats are saying in the United Nations or in the EU, to recognise that this is the biblical heartland of Israel, this is Judea and Samaria, that this is not disputed land, but this is God's land?
Yes, it depends if you want to believe the truth or the lie. And there's a verse in, I think it's Deuteronomy 33:29. The Bible foresaw this thousands of years ago. It says about Israel, "Happy art thou, O Israel, thine enemies shall be found to be liars unto thee." So it's as if the enemies are liars, the enemies of Israel, and liars are the enemies of Israel. So if you want to stand on the side of truth, it might be an inconvenient truth to some people, but it is the truth. And also, it's not just in the Bible, it is supported by international law. Every law that's binding and irrevocable stands on the side of the Hebrew having that land as theirs. It was reconstituted, I think, on April the 24th and 25th, 1920 at San Marino.
Yeah. And Phil, I love the analogy that you give that Jerusalem is the heart of Israel and the ribs are Judea and Samaria that actually protect Jerusalem. Share with us the strategic importance to Israel of maintaining control over Judea and Samaria, which are the mountains of Israel.
Yes, I mentioned the Palestinian National Charter of 1964, but there's also Articles 15 and 22 of the 1968 Palestinian National Charter, and they have said quite emphatically that they want to eliminate Israel. So there's no such thing as a two-state solution. The only solution is Israel regaining and exercising sovereignty over the whole area, because the enemy is supported by, I would say, all European nations and most nations of the world. But if they do create a Palestinian state, then their aim is to legitimize a people who wish to destroy Israel completely. Just one other thing. The word create a Palestinian state is interesting because when you create something, you bring into being something which didn't formally exist. So there we have a problem. Palestine has never existed. It doesn't exist and it will never exist because you're coming up against the God of Israel.
Now talking about how how Judea and Samaria fell into Israeli hands. We have to mention the Six-Day War of June 67. Previously, that was controlled by the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, I think from 1948 up until June of 1967. And that's when Judea and Samaria fell into the hands of the Israelis. Share with us how important it was, because we see that this is when Bible prophecy was fulfilled, because it talks about how the Jews will actually grow vineyards on the mountains of Israel. And that's only really been happening post 1967. So this is within the lifetime of most of us watching this program, that these vineyards have been planted in the hills of Jerusalem in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Share with us how important that is.
Yeah, it's important because if you go back to the 67 borders as required by the international community, you're not going back to Palestinian borders, you're going back to Jordanian borders. And so therefore, you know, I'm going to digress slightly here until I get my thoughts back. There is no such thing as Palestinian refugees. Because if there were, why did the UN in 1948 find it necessary to redefine what a refugee was? Now, a refugee is really somebody who's had to leave their habitual home, who have been there from time immemorial. But it was changed not just for refugees, it was only changed for Arab refugees living in Israel. And all they had to prove was that they had been there 2 years prior to 1948. So if they'd been there from time immemorial, how come such a big thing was done?
We'll go to this excellent video by the CBN tells the story of how Judea and Samaria fell into Israel's hands and under Israeli sovereignty after the Six-Day War in June 1967.
Much of the world calls the playgrounds these children enjoy an obstacle to peace. That's because they're in Judea and Samaria, otherwise known as the West Bank.
Are we witnessing prophecy unfolding right now after the 1967 war?
Absolutely. It says that the sound of children playing in the streets will be heard once again. So you hear it, you see it.
I spoke with former Shiloh Mayor David Rubin in Shiloh, overlooking the road of the patriarchs, the highway Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would have traveled on. Rubin told me the Six-Day War was pivotal in Israel's history. It opened the door for Jewish people to redeem the biblical heartland after 2,000 years in exile. Places like Jerusalem, home of 2 consecutive Jewish temples, Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. Hebron, where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their wives are buried. And Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood for 369 years. They all came back into Israeli hands.
So you see 67, the Six-Day War, just like a pivot, a prophetic pivot in time and history?
Oh, clearly. It says in the book of Ezekiel, the dry bones being put back together again. Israel was being put back together again as a nation. If we don't have a right to Shiloh, and we don't have a right to Shechem, and we don't have a right to Bethel and Jericho, we definitely don't have a right to Tel Aviv.
But not everyone saw the opportunity. It took until 1978 for Shiloh to be established, just above the site where the tabernacle had rested.
There were Israelis who were coming here, trying to set up tents on the lower hills of Shiloh, and the Israeli prime minister, who was looking over his shoulder at the American president, kept sending in the army to chase them away.
Just months after the Six-Day War, Israelis established the first Jewish community in Judea, about 35 miles south of Shiloh at Kfar Etzion. Jews lived there before Israel's independence war in 1948 and were either evacuated or massacred by the Jordanians.
When this group of orphans of those who were murdered notified the Israeli government that if you don't give us the permit, we will go on without a permit. The government really couldn't stand up against orphans of those who were murdered. And so Kfar Etzion was established.
Rabbi Eliezer Waldman was one of those who helped establish the next community in ancient Hebron.
There was always a Jewish community in Hebron, even during the 2,000 years of exile, until 1929, when the Arabs massacred the Jewish community here.
A small group of families rented a hotel in Hebron for the Passover Seder. Essentially, they never left.
And I believe then almost the entire population of Israel was with us. Even more than a half a year after the Six-Day War, the spirits were high among almost the entire population.
Thousands of Israeli pilgrims enter the old city of Jerusalem for solemn religious ceremonies.
All of the media was with us. Yeah, I even remember headlines, passages of the prophets hovering in the air.
After 50 years, some 430,000 Israelis live in more than 200 communities in Judea and Samaria. The number jumps to 750,000 if Eastern Jerusalem neighborhoods are included.
The growth here has been so tremendous. And as we gotten through those 50 years after the Six-Day War and we're looking to the future, so we have this vision of a booming Shiloh once again.
50 years ago, what would this place have looked like?
Barren desert. There was nothing. It was just hills of weeds and thorns.
This road will lead to a new school for the growing population. There are 8,000 residents in the Shiloh Township. More than 2,000 of them are children who study here in Shiloh.
We learned that when Israel is not in the land, that the land lays barren. The land doesn't give its fruit. And now the land of Israel is giving of its fruit because Israel is back. And the most important fruit is what you see right here. All these children here.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Shiloh in Samaria.
And there we have the fulfillment of biblical prophecy unfold before our eyes. The mountains of Israel, known as Judea and Samaria, being occupied by not Israel illegally, by Jewish communities that are prospering, living in the land. I'll come down to the last 5 minutes of the programme, Phil. And I suppose the big question is, we know that the world likes to refer to this area as the West Bank, or the international community refers it to the occupied Palestinian territories, but God refers this area as Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel. Now, if that's how God describes it, isn't it important as Christians we stand by those communities living in Judea and Samaria? Practically, how can our viewers do that?
Yeah, we have to stand with these people. They have gone back, and they've gone back to live amongst hostile people, and they've shown this. A person who became a friend of mine lived in Adora, quite close to Hebron, and I think it was his grandfather was one that was slaughtered in the Hebron massacre that was mentioned. And not so long ago, I think it's in 2002, his little girl was slaughtered, 5 years of age, and horrifically murdered. And the thing is that they are murdered, and if you murder a Jewish child, you were paid by the Palestinian Authority for life. And that money comes from British taxpayers' money. So they have to go back. They are back, and they're facing it head on. And every day and every night an attack could come from the air, from the sea, from the land, or worst of all, from underground. Because they do dig, and they try to get into the communities to snatch children or anybody they can. But we have to, as believers, stand with God's people. Because I think it says in the Epistle of John that if you say you love me, whom you haven't seen, and hate your brother, being the firstborn, the Israelis that you have seen, God calls us a liar. So scripturally, we are commanded to love his firstborn. But unfortunately, it hasn't been done. But I, and myself, let them down so many times by living for myself. But we have to sort of put ourselves on the altar, stand as one with them, because A, the Lord commanded it, and B, we have benefited from them being there.
Absolutely. And Phil, these Jewish settlers are very brave. They're very courageous people. They feel like they are there because they have a mission from God to take control of Judea and Samaria, which is the biblical heartland of Israel. They are hated by so much of Israel, who blames them for the lack of peace in the region. They are condemned by the international community, saying that they are actually preventing peace from taking place in the Middle East. In a proposed establishment of a Palestinian state, that the Palestinian leadership have said that they want it to be a Judean-free land, even though this is the biblical heartland of Israel. They face threat of sanctions through the BDS movement, the boycotts, sanctions on divestment movements. The EU has also published its own guidelines calling for economic sanctions and boycotts for goods and produce produced in Judea and Samaria. Isn't that a kind of indication of what an intense battle that they're going through just to be there, and how the world hates them? And therefore, isn't it so important as Christians we show solidarity with them? Maybe one of the best ways to do that is to actually go and visit them when we get a chance to visit Israel, to go and see these beautiful communities for ourselves.
Yes, go on a tour, go to the communities, because really you do not want to stand with the world, and particularly the UN or the United Nations. And I'll finish with this. Remember the 12th of November. Because on the 12th of November 1938, there was a decree issued in Nazi Germany which barred Jews from economic life. And once you haven't got any money, you are so vulnerable. Now, on the same day, November the 12th, 1919, the European Union barred settlers from economic life. So really, we do not want to stand with the UN, or in particular the EU. We have to stand with them.
Phil, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest on today's Middle East Report. Thank you so much for representing the Jewish communities living in the biblical heartland of Israel, that is Judea and Samaria. And I just want to thank you for watching today's program. Please, we need to pray for those Jewish communities living in Judea and Samaria. They are surrounded by hostile Palestinian communities. but they're there because they feel a call of God upon their lives, and they have recultivated what was once a wasteland and built beautiful homes and beautiful communities, and they are living there in fulfillment of biblical prophecy in the heartland of Israel, which is Judea and Samaria. So please support them, visit them, encourage them, and also pray for them, because they are feeling very isolated, they feel alone, and as Christians it's an imperative that we speak up for them. So I want to thank you for watching today's edition of the Middle East Report.